I was standing in my college apartment parking lot at 7 months pregnant, watching everything I owned turn to ash, when the man in the $1,000 suit walked up and asked if I lost anything important. Quick question before we dive in. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. So there I was, 22 years old, belly swollen with a baby I wasn't sure I could feed, staring at orange flames licking out of the third-floor window of Building C. My building, my window. The firefighters had their hoses going, water arcing through the February cold. But I could already tell it was too late. My laptop, gone. My textbooks, gone. The acceptance letter to Howard Law that I'd pinned above my desk like some kind of altar, definitely gone. I had my phone in my pocket, the clothes on my back, and $37 in my checking account. That was it. That was my entire life. The apartment complex was one of those places that advertised itself as student housing, but was really just subsidized desperation. Peeling paint, carpets that smelled like 40 years of other people's lives, cockroaches that came out at night like they paid rent too. But it was mine. I'd worked 3 jobs to afford it. Breakfast shift at BiHop, afternoon tutoring sessions at the community center, weekend inventory stocking at Target. I slept 4 hours a night if I was lucky. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache. But I was doing it. I was a senior at State, majoring in political science, 3.8 GPA, holding on by my fingernails, but holding on. And then Marcus happened. Marcus was the kind of mistake that felt like destiny at first. Tall, charming, studying business, always talking about the startup he was going to launch, the empire he was going to build. We met at a campus mixer my junior year. He had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room, like your dreams mattered just as much as his. 3 months in, I was in love. 6 months in, I was pregnant. 8 months in, he was gone. Blocked my number, dropped out, moved back to Atlanta. His mother called me once, told me her son wasn't ready to be a father and that I should figure it out. Then she hung up. So I figured it out, alone. I'd been managing, barely. Morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made my bones feel like lead. But I kept going to class, kept working my shifts, kept telling myself that once I graduated, once I got into law school, everything would get better. I'd build something for me and this baby. I'd prove everyone wrong who said a girl like me from a neighborhood like mine wouldn't make it. Then the fire happened. I'd been at the library studying for a constitutional law exam when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. The voice on the other end was my downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Chen, screaming that the building was on fire, that everyone was evacuating, that I needed to come now. I ran the whole 8 blocks, my hand pressed against my belly, feeling the baby kick with every jarring step, like she knew something was wrong. By the time I got there, half the building was already engulfed. Black smoke pouring into the winter sky, fire trucks everywhere, lights flashing red and blue, people crying, people shouting. I pushed through the crowd, trying to see, trying to understand. Someone grabbed my arm. It was Mrs. Chen, soot on her face, her 2 kids clinging to her legs. She told me it started in the unit next to mine. Electrical fire. Spread fast. No one was hurt, but everything inside was gone or would be soon. I just stood there. Couldn't move. Couldn't process it. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and I put my hand on my stomach and thought, what now? What the hell do I do now? That's when he appeared. Tall, maybe late 50s, with silver hair and a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. He was standing off to the side, watching the fire like everyone else, but something about him was different. Calm, observing, taking notes on his phone. I figured he was an insurance guy or a building inspector. Then he walked straight toward me. Did you lose anything important? I almost laughed. The question was so absurd, I didn't know how to answer. I looked down at my belly, then back at the fire, then at him. Everything, I said. I lost everything. He nodded, slowly, like he expected that answer. Then he handed me a business card. Simple. White, embossed lettering. David Harrington, CEO, Harrington Capital Group. He owned this building. Well, his company does. They bought it 6 months ago as an investment property. He was actually here today to inspect it, see what needed fixing. He paused, looked at the fire, shook his head. Clearly, a lot needed fixing. I didn't know what to say. I was exhausted, terrified, and this man in his expensive suit was talking to me about real estate investments while my life literally burned in front of us. I'm sorry this happened, he continued. I know that doesn't help, but I want you to know that I'm going to make sure everyone displaced gets temporary housing, and I'm going to personally handle your situation. Why? I asked. The word came out sharp, defensive. I'd learned a long time ago that when people with money offer help, there's usually a catch. He looked at me for a long moment. Really looked at me. Not at my belly, not at my cheap coat or my scuffed boots, at my face. Because you look like someone who deserves a break, he said, and because I can. Then he walked away, back toward a black Mercedes, parked across the street, and I was left standing there with his business card in my hand, wondering if I'd just imagined the whole thing. That night, I slept in my car in the Target parking lot where I worked. I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, wrapped myself in the emergency blanket I kept in the trunk, and stared at the ceiling. The baby was restless, moving constantly, like she could feel my panic. I whispered to her that it would be okay, that we'd figure it out, but I didn't believe my own words. I thought about calling my mother, but I already knew what she'd say. She'd warned me about Marcus, warned me about getting pregnant, warned me that college was a waste of time for girls like us. She'd tell me to come home to Memphis, get a job at the factory where she worked, raise the baby in the same 2-bedroom house where I grew up, the same house where my father left when I was 6, the same house where I swore I'd never end up. So I didn't call her. I thought about calling my best friend, Shanice, but she was barely making it herself, working 2 jobs and taking care of her grandmother. I couldn't add my problems to her plate. I was completely, utterly alone. Around 3 a.m, I finally fell asleep, and I dreamed about the fire, except in the dream, I was inside the apartment and the baby was already born, and I was trying to find her in the smoke but couldn't. I woke up gasping, my heart hammering, my hands instinctively going to my belly to make sure she was still there, still safe, still mine. The next morning, I showed up to my IHOP shift like nothing had happened. My manager, Carol, took one look at me and pulled me into the back office. "Shayla, what's going on?" she asked. "You look like you haven't slept in days." So I told her about the fire, about the car, about everything. And Carol, who'd always been tough but fair, who'd never shown much emotion in the 3 years I'd worked there, teared up. "You're staying with me," she said. "I've got a pull-out couch. It's not much, but it's better than your car." I wanted to say no. I wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, some illusion that I had my life together. But I was too tired to pretend anymore. "Thank you," I whispered. Carol let me crash at her place that night. Small apartment, 1 bedroom, but clean and warm. She made me tea and grilled cheese and didn't ask questions, just let me exist. The baby was calm for the first time in 24 hours, and I took that as a sign that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. But I still had problems, big ones. I'd lost all my textbooks, which meant I couldn't study for midterms that were 3 weeks away. I'd lost my laptop, which had every paper, every research document, every job application I'd been working on. I'd lost the professional clothes I'd bought for my law school interview at Howard. I'd lost the nursery stuff I'd been slowly collecting from thrift stores. Onesies, bottles, a portable crib. I'd lost proof that I was building something. The next day, I called the number on David Harrington's business card. A receptionist answered, polished and professional. I explained who I was, that Mr. Harrington had given me his card, that I needed to discuss the fire. She put me on hold. I expected to wait forever, expected to get bounced to some claims department, expected to be forgotten. But then his voice came on the line. "Shayla," he said, and I was startled that he remembered my name. I didn't remember telling him. He knew that I was getting my PhD. He knew that I had an insurance policy. He knew that I was a senior at state. "I know people," he said simply, "and I wanted to understand who you were before I made you an offer." "What offer?" He leaned forward. "I want to help you, not out of guilt or obligation, out of belief. I've spent 30 years building companies, investing in ventures, making money. And somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started. My wife, Grace, she passed away 2 years ago, cancer. Before she died, she made me promise that I'd use what we'd built to do something meaningful, not just write checks to charities, actually change someone's life." He paused, took a sip of his coffee. "So here's what I'm proposing. I'll cover your housing until you graduate. I'll replace everything you lost in the fire. I'll make sure you have what you need for the baby. And when you go to Howard in the fall, I'll cover your tuition." I stared at him. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "Because my wife would have," he said quietly. "And because I think you're going to do something important with your life. I can see it. Call it instinct." I can't accept that." "Yes, you can. All I ask in return is that when you're successful, when you're a lawyer or a judge or whatever you're meant to be, you help someone else the way I'm helping you. You pay it forward." I felt tears building behind my eyes. I didn't want to cry in front of this man, this stranger, but I couldn't help it. "I don't even know you," I said. "Then get to know me," David replied. "Let me be part of your journey. Let me do this one good thing." And just like that, with those words, everything changed. I didn't say yes right away, even though every logical part of my brain was screaming at me to take the offer. Instead, I sat there in that cafe, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup I was too nervous to drink from, staring at the silver-haired billionaire who was offering me a life I didn't think existed for people like me. This feels like a movie, like something that doesn't happen in real life. David smiled, and it was the first time I'd seen him show any real emotion. I've learned that real life is stranger than any movie, and more unfair. I'm just trying to tip the scales back a little bit. "What if I fail?" The question came out before I could stop it. "What if you invest all this in me and I don't make it through law school? What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I can't handle it?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Shayla, you've already been handling it. You've been working 3 jobs while pregnant and maintaining a 3.8 GPA. You got into one of the best law schools in the country with no help, no safety net, no rich parents making donations. You're not going to fail. But even if you stumble, even if things get hard, that's not failure, that's life. And I'll still be here." Something about the way he said it made me believe him. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, I'll accept your help." David pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed sitting beside him. Inside were papers, documents, a plan already laid out like he'd known I'd say yes. First thing, he slid a set of keys across the table. "I own a condo downtown, 2-bedroom, furnished, in a secure building with parking. It's empty right now. I want you to live there. No rent. It's yours until you graduate, and beyond if you need it." I picked up the keys with shaking hands. They were warm from his pocket. "Second, here's a credit card linked to an account I've set up for you. It has a monthly allowance for groceries, baby supplies, necessities. Don't abuse it, but don't hesitate to use it for what you need." He slid a black credit card across the table. My name was already embossed on it. "Third, I've arranged for a small stipend, $1,500 a month. It's not a lot, but it should help you cut back on work hours so you can focus on school and preparing for the baby." My throat was so tight I could barely breathe. "David, I don't—" "Let me finish," he said gently. "Fourth,
I've contacted Howard. Your tuition for the first year is paid. We'll handle the rest year by year. And fifth, I've scheduled an appointment for you next week with an obstetrician. One of the best in the city. She's expecting you. I started crying then. Not delicate tears, but full, body-shaking sobs that I couldn't control. David didn't move, didn't try to comfort me, just let me have the moment. When I finally collected myself, embarrassed and exhausted, he handed me a napkin. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. You're allowed to feel. I don't understand why you're doing this." He was quiet for a moment, looking past me toward the cafe windows where early morning light was starting to filter through. "My wife and I couldn't have children," he said finally. "We tried for years. Treatments, adoption attempts, everything. It never worked out. Grace always said that maybe we were meant to help children in a different way, through our foundation, through scholarships. But after she died, I realized I'd been doing it all wrong. Writing checks from a distance, never really seeing the people we were helping, never being part of their stories." He looked back at me. "When I saw you standing there pregnant and watching everything burn, something clicked. Grace would have walked right up to you and asked how she could help. So I'm doing what she would have done. I'm showing up."
I believed him. Maybe I was naive, maybe I should have been more suspicious, but something in his eyes told me this was real. "I'll make you proud," I said. "I promise." "You already have." The condo was unreal. 18th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, hardwood floors, a kitchen with appliances I'd only seen on cooking shows. The second bedroom was small but perfect for a nursery. There was even a washer and dryer in the unit. After years of lugging laundry to sketchy laundromats, that felt like the ultimate luxury. I moved in that same day. Carol helped me, bringing over the few things I'd been keeping at her place. And when she saw the condo, her jaw literally dropped. "Shayla, what the hell?" she said. "Did you join a cult? Sell your soul? What's happening?" I told her everything. About David, about his offer, about the deal we'd made. She listened, skeptical at first, then gradually softening. "Okay, but if this guy turns out to be a serial killer, I'm going to haunt you from the grave," she said, finally. "Deal." That night, I lay in the queen-sized bed in my new bedroom, staring at the ceiling, feeling the baby move inside me. I put my hand on my belly and talked to her. "I don't know if you can hear me in there," I said, "but things are going to be different now. We're going to be okay. Better than okay. We're going to make it." She kicked in response, and I took it as agreement. The next few weeks were a blur of adjustment. I went to my new doctor, Dr. Patel, who was warm and thorough and didn't make me feel like a charity case. She did an ultrasound, showed me my daughter on the screen, told me everything looked healthy. I cried again, but this time from relief. I cut back my hours at IHOP and Target. Carol understood. My tutoring gig at the community center, though, I kept. Those kids reminded me where I came from, and I didn't want to lose that connection. David checked in once a week, not invasive, not overbearing, just a text or a brief phone call asking how I was doing, if I needed anything. He never asked for anything in return, never hinted at expectations beyond our original agreement. It was the strangest, most generous relationship I'd ever had. But not everyone was happy about it. My mother called 2 weeks after I moved into the condo. I'd finally told her about the fire, about David's help. I expected concern, but what I got was suspicion. "Shayla, nobody gives you something for nothing," she said, her Memphis accent thick with judgment. "This man wants something from you. Maybe not now, but eventually." "He doesn't, Mama. He's just helping." "Rich white men don't help poor black girls out of the goodness of their hearts. You're being naive." "He's not." I stopped, took a breath. "He lost his wife. He's trying to do something good in her memory. Why is that hard to believe?" "Because I've lived longer than you and I know how the world works."
The conversation ended badly. We didn't talk for 3 weeks after that. It hurt, but I was used to my mother not believing in me. School became manageable again. I'd replaced my laptop with David's help, re-downloaded my papers from cloud storage, bought new textbooks. My professors had been understanding about the fire, giving me extensions on assignments. I caught up quickly, my grades staying strong. But the closer I got to my due date, the more anxious I became. I was terrified of labor, terrified of becoming a mother, terrified that I'd somehow screw up this tiny person who was depending on me. I'd read all the books, taken the hospital classes, prepared as much as anyone could prepare, but there was still this deep, gnawing fear that I wasn't enough. David noticed. Of course he noticed. "You're going to be a great mother," he said during one of our weekly coffee meetings. We'd made it a routine now. Every Friday morning, 6 a.m., same cafe. "You don't know that." "I do, because you care. That's 90% of parenting. The rest you figure out as you go." "Did you and Grace ever come close? To having kids, I mean?" He smiled sadly. "Once. Grace got pregnant when we were 30. We were ecstatic. Started planning, buying things, dreaming. She miscarried at 12 weeks. After that, it never happened again. We tried everything, but..." He trailed off. "Eventually, we made peace with it, found other ways to build a family. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't leave a hole." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Every path has its purpose. Maybe mine was always leading to this, to helping you." I believed him. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I should have been more suspicious. But something in his eyes told me this was real. "I'll make you proud," I said. "I promise." "You already have." The condo was unreal. 18th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, hardwood floors, a kitchen with appliances I'd only seen on cooking shows. The second bedroom was small, but perfect for a nursery. There was even a washer and dryer in the unit. After years of lugging laundry to sketchy laundromats, that felt like the ultimate luxury. I moved in that same day. Carol helped me, bringing over the few things I'd been keeping at her place, and when she saw the condo, her jaw literally dropped. "Shayla, what the hell?" she said. "Did you join a cult? Sell your soul? What's happening?" I told her everything. About David, about his offer, about the deal we'd made. She listened, skeptical at first, then gradually softening. "Okay, but if this guy turns out to be a serial killer, I'm gonna haunt you from the grave," she said finally. Deal. That night, I lay in the queen-size bed in my new bedroom, staring at the ceiling, feeling the baby move inside me. I put my hand on my belly and talked to her. "I don't know if you can hear me in there," I said, "but things are gonna be different now. We're gonna be okay. Better than okay. We're gonna make it." She kicked in response, and I took it as agreement. 3 weeks before my due date, I got a call from Howard Law. My admissions counselor, Miss Rivera, wanted to schedule a final phone interview. Just a formality, but required. We set it for the following Tuesday. I prepared obsessively, reviewed my application, practiced answers to common questions, researched recent cases and legal trends. The day of the interview, I woke up with contractions. Not strong ones, just twinges. Braxton Hicks, I told myself. Practice contractions. Totally normal at this stage. The interview was at 2 p.m. By noon, the contractions were coming every 20 minutes. By 1:30, every 15. I called Dr. Patel's office. The nurse told me to time them and, if they got to 10 minutes apart or became painful, to head to the hospital. At 1:55, I dialed into the interview. "Shayla, how are you doing?" Miss Rivera said warmly. "Great," I lied, breathing through a contraction. "Really excited to talk with you." We went through the standard questions. Why Howard? What kind of law did I want to practice? Where did I see myself in 10 years? I answered thoughtfully, passionately, ignoring the increasing pressure in my lower back. Then Miss Rivera asked, "Is there anything else you'd like to share with us? Anything that might help us understand who you are beyond your application? A contraction hit. Stronger this time. I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter, forced my voice to stay steady. I think adversity reveals character, I said, and I've faced a lot of it. Lost my father young, grew up in poverty, got pregnant my senior year, lost everything I owned in a fire, but none of that has stopped me. If anything, it's made me more determined. I want to be a lawyer because I've seen what happens to people who can't afford good representation, who don't know how to navigate systems designed to keep them out. I want to be the person who shows up for them, who fights for them, who refuses to let them be invisible. There was a pause. Then Miss Rivera said, her voice thick, "Thank you for sharing that, Shayla. That's exactly the kind of passion we're looking for at Howard. I think you're going to do incredible things." We said our goodbyes. I hung up. Another contraction hit immediately, this one strong enough to make me gasp. I called David. "It's time. The baby's coming." He was at my condo in 15 minutes. Don't ask me how he got across the city that fast. He just did. He drove me to the hospital, stayed with me while I checked in, held my hand when the nurses confirmed I was in active labor. Should I call anyone? Your mother? Friends? Call Carol. Her number's in my phone. Tell her it's happening. David stepped out to make the call. I lay in the hospital bed, monitors strapped to my belly, feeling my body do something I had no control over. It was terrifying and primal and overwhelming. Carol showed up an hour later with Shanice. They flanked my bed, holding my hands, talking me through contractions. David stayed too, sitting quietly in the corner, texting occasionally, but mostly just present. Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain so intense I couldn't think, couldn't focus on anything except breathing. The nurses were kind. Dr. Patel was calm and encouraging. But there were moments when I was convinced I couldn't do it. When I wanted to give up. When the fear became too much. "You can do this," Carol kept saying. "You're strong. You're stronger than you know." At 4:37 a.m., my daughter was born. 6 pounds, 8 ounces, perfect fingers, perfect toes, a full head of dark hair. They placed her on my chest, warm and slippery and screaming, and I looked down at her face and felt something crack open inside me. "Hi. Hi, baby. I'm your mama. I've got you. I've got you forever." She stopped crying, opened her eyes, dark eyes, searching, somehow wise beyond their minutes. And in that moment, everything I'd been through, every hardship, every loss, every moment of doubt, it all made sense because it had led me here, to her. I named her Grace. When I told David, sitting in my hospital room later that morning, he broke down. This stoic, composed billionaire who had been nothing but controlled and generous, he cried, not quietly either, real, shoulder-shaking sobs that he didn't try to hide. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I did. Your wife helped save us even though she never met us. This is how I honor that." He stayed for an hour, holding baby Grace with a tenderness that made my heart ache. He looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "She's perfect," he said. "She really is." What I didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that Grace's birth was only the beginning of the story. The real challenges were still coming. The first 2 weeks with Grace were the hardest and most beautiful days of my life. I'd read all the books, taken all the classes, thought I was prepared. I wasn't. Nothing prepares you for the reality of a newborn, the constant cycle of feeding and changing and trying to decode cries that all sound the same at 3 a.m. But I loved it. Even when I was exhausted beyond words, even when my body ached from healing, even when I hadn't showered in 3 days, I loved it. Grace was mine, this tiny, perfect person who depended on me completely. It was terrifying and sacred all at once. David came by twice in those first weeks. He never stayed long, never overstayed his welcome.
He'd bring groceries, leave them in the kitchen, hold Grace for a few minutes while I showered or ate something real. Then he'd disappear, giving us space to figure out our new rhythm. Carol visited too, bringing frozen meals and baby clothes her sister's kids had outgrown. Shanice came over on weekends, helping with laundry and dishes while I napped. My mother called once, asked how the baby was, didn't ask to visit. That stung, but I was getting used to her distance. I was supposed to go back to my classes 3 weeks after giving birth. State had a policy for student parents. You could take up to 6 weeks off with medical documentation. I'd taken 3 because I couldn't afford to fall behind with graduation only 2 months away. The first day back was brutal. I'd arranged my schedule so all my classes were on Tuesdays and Thursdays, condensed but manageable. Carol had agreed to watch Grace those 2 days. I'd pump enough milk to last, leave detailed instructions, text constantly to check in. I walked into my constitutional law class feeling like I was held together with duct tape and prayer. My professor, Dr. Morrison, an older Black woman who'd been one of the first female attorneys in the state, stopped me after class. "Shayla," she said, "I heard about everything. The fire, the baby. How are you managing?" "I'm managing," I said automatically. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me but wouldn't push. "If you need extensions, accommodations, anything, you come to me, understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "And Shayla, I'm proud of you. What you're doing, it's not easy, but you're going to make it. I can tell." I held it together until I got to my car, then I cried for 20 minutes. April became May. Finals approached. I studied during Grace's naps, between feedings, in the stolen moments when she was content in her bassinet. My brain felt like mush, but muscle memory kicked in. I'd been a good student my entire life. I knew how to push through. My exams went better than expected. Not perfect, but solid. My GPA would take a small hit, but I'd still graduate with honors. That was enough. Graduation was set for May 18th. David insisted on paying for my cap and gown, for announcements, for everything. He also asked if he could attend. "You don't have to," I said during one of our Friday coffee meetings. Grace was with me now, strapped to my chest in a carrier. She'd become a fixture at the cafe. The baristas knew her name. "I'd like to," David said, "if you're comfortable with it." "Of course I am. You're family now. I don't know what else to call you." His eyes got that soft look they got sometimes when I said things like that. Family works. My mother called the week before graduation. I almost didn't answer, but Grace was sleeping and I had a moment of weakness. "Shayla," she said, "I know we haven't been talking much, but I wanted to say I'm proud of you for graduating." "Thanks, Mama." "Are you coming home after, bringing the baby to meet me?" "I'm going to law school, Mama, in Washington. I told you that." "Right, law school." Her tone was flat, like she still didn't believe it was real. "Well, good luck with that." She hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling that familiar mix of anger and sadness that came with any interaction with my mother. Grace stirred, made a little sound in her sleep. I looked down at her and made a promise. I would never make her feel like she wasn't enough. Graduation day was sunny and warm. I put on my cap and gown, dressed Grace in a tiny white dress Carol had bought her. David picked us up in his Mercedes, driving us to the stadium where the ceremony was being held. 3 weeks before my due date, I got a call from Howard Law. My admissions counselor, Miss Rivera, wanted to schedule a final phone interview. Just a formality, but required. We set it for the following Tuesday. I prepared obsessively, reviewed my application, practiced answers to common questions, researched recent cases and legal trends. The day of the interview, I woke up with contractions. Not strong ones, just twinges. Braxton Hicks, I told myself. Practice contractions. Totally normal at this stage. The interview was at 2 p.m. By noon, the contractions were coming every 20 minutes. By 1:30, every 15. I called Dr. Patel's office. The nurse told me to time them, and if they got to 10 minutes apart or became painful, to head to the hospital. At 1:55, I dialed into the interview. "Shayla," Miss Rivera said warmly,
How are you doing? Great, I lied, breathing through a contraction. Really excited to talk with you. We went through the standard questions. Why Howard? What kind of law did I want to practice? Where did I see myself in 10 years? I answered thoughtfully, passionately, ignoring the increasing pressure in my lower back. Then Miss Rivera asked, "Is there anything else you'd like to share with us? Anything that might help us understand who you are beyond your application?" A contraction hit, stronger this time. I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter, forced my voice to stay steady. I think adversity reveals character, and I've faced a lot of it. Lost my father young, grew up in poverty, got pregnant my senior year, lost everything I owned in a fire, but none of that has stopped me. If anything, it's made me more determined. I want to be a lawyer because I've seen what happens to people who can't afford good representation, who don't know how to navigate systems designed to keep them out. I want to be the person who shows up for them, who fights for them, who refuses to let them be invisible. There was a pause. Then Miss Rivera said, her voice thick, "Thank you for sharing that, Shayla. That's exactly the kind of passion we're looking for at Howard. I think you're going to do incredible things." We said our goodbyes. I hung up. Another contraction hit immediately. This one strong enough to make me gasp. I called David. "It's time," I said. "The baby's coming." He was at my condo in 15 minutes. Don't ask me how he got across the city that fast. He just did. He drove me to the hospital, stayed with me while I checked in, held my hand when the nurses confirmed I was in active labor. "Should I call anyone? Your mother? Friends?" "Call Carol. Her number's in my phone. Tell her it's happening." David stepped out to make the call. I lay in the hospital bed, monitors strapped to my belly, feeling my body do something I had no control over. It was terrifying and primal and overwhelming. Carol showed up an hour later with Shanice. They flanked my bed, holding my hands, talking me through contractions. David stayed too, sitting quietly in the corner, texting occasionally, but mostly just present. Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain. So intense, I couldn't think, couldn't focus on anything except breathing. The nurses were kind, Dr. Patel was calm and encouraging, but there were moments when I was convinced I couldn't do it, when I wanted to give up, when the fear became too much. "You can do this," Carol kept saying. "You're strong. You're stronger than you know." At 4:37 a.m., my daughter was born. 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Perfect fingers, perfect toes, a full head of dark hair. They placed her on my chest, warm and slippery and screaming, and I looked down at her face and felt something crack open inside me. "Hi," I whispered. "Hi, baby. I'm your mama. I've got you. I've got you forever." She stopped crying, opened her eyes, dark eyes, searching, somehow wise beyond their minutes. And in that moment, everything I'd been through, every hardship, every loss, every moment of doubt, it all made sense because it had led me here, to her. I named her Grace. When I told David, sitting in my hospital room that morning, he broke down. This stoic, composed billionaire who'd been nothing but controlled and generous, he cried, not quietly either, real shoulder-shaking sobs that he didn't try to hide. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I did. Your wife helped save us, even though she never met us. This is how I honor that."
He stayed for an hour, holding baby Grace with a tenderness that made my heart ache. He looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "She's perfect," he said. She really is. What I didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that Grace's birth was only the beginning of the story. The real challenges were still coming. The first 2 weeks with Grace were the hardest and most beautiful days of my life. I'd read all the books, taken all the classes, thought I was prepared. I wasn't. Nothing prepares you for the reality of a newborn. The constant cycle of feeding and changing and trying to decode cries that all sound the same at 3 a.m. But I loved it. Even when I was exhausted beyond words,
even when my body ached from healing. Even when I hadn't showered in 3 days, I loved it. Grace was mine. This tiny, perfect person who depended on me completely. It was terrifying and sacred all at once. David came by twice in those first weeks. He never stayed long, never overstayed his welcome. He'd bring groceries, leave them in the kitchen, hold Grace for a few minutes while I showered or ate something real. Then he'd disappear, giving us space to figure out our new rhythm. Carol visited too, bringing frozen meals and baby clothes her sister's kids had outgrown. Shanice came over on weekends, helping with laundry and dishes while I napped. My mother called once, asked how the baby was, didn't ask to visit. That stung, but I was getting used to her distance. I was supposed to go back to my classes 3 weeks after giving birth. State had a policy for student parents. You could take up to 6 weeks off with medical documentation. I'd taken 3 because I couldn't afford to fall behind with graduation only 2 months away. The first day back was brutal. I'd arranged my schedule so all my classes were on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Condensed, but manageable. Carol had agreed to watch Grace those 2 days. I'd pump enough milk to last, leave detailed instructions, text constantly to check in. I walked into my constitutional law class feeling like I was held together with duct tape and prayer. My professor, Dr. Morrison, an older Black woman who'd been one of the first female attorneys in the state, stopped me after class. "Shayla," she said, "I heard about everything. The fire, the baby. How are you managing?" "I'm managing," I said automatically. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, but wouldn't push. "If you need extensions, accommodations, anything, you come to me. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "And Shayla, I'm proud of you. What you're doing, it's not easy, but you're gonna make it. I can tell." I held it together until I got to my car. Then I cried for 20 minutes. April became May, finals approached. I studied during Grace's naps, between feedings, in the stolen moments when she was content in her bassinet. My brain felt like mush, but muscle memory kicked in. I'd been a good student my entire life. I knew how to push through. My exams went better than expected. Not perfect, but solid. My GPA would take a small hit, but I'd still graduate with honors. That was enough. Graduation was set for May 18th. David insisted on paying for my cap and gown, for announcements, for everything. He also asked if he could attend. "You don't have to," I said during one of our Friday coffee meetings. Grace was with me now, strapped to my chest in a carrier. She had become a fixture at the cafe. The baristas knew her name. "David liked to, if you're comfortable with it." "Of course I am. You're family now. I don't know what else to call you." His eyes got that soft look they got sometimes when I said things like that. "Family works." My mother called the week before graduation. I almost didn't answer, but Grace was sleeping and I had a moment of weakness. "Shayla," she said, "I know we haven't been talking much, but I wanted to say I'm proud of you for graduating." "Thanks, Mama." "Are you coming home after, bringing the baby to meet me?" "I'm going to law school, Mama, in Washington. I told you that." "Right, law school." Her tone was flat, like she still didn't believe it was real. "Well, good luck with that." She hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling that familiar mix of anger and sadness that came with any interaction with my mother. Grace stirred, made a little sound in her sleep. I looked down at her and made a promise. I would never make her feel like she wasn't enough. Graduation day was sunny and warm. I put on my cap and gown, dressed Grace in a tiny white dress Carol had bought her. David picked us up in his Mercedes, driving us to the stadium where the ceremony was being held. As we walked across campus, I saw other graduates with their families. Moms and dads taking pictures, siblings running around, grandparents beaming with pride. For a moment, I felt that old familiar ache of having no one. Then David put his hand on my shoulder. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." The ceremony was long, filled with speeches about our futures and the challenges we'd face. When they called my name, I walked across that stage with Grace in my arms, because there was no one to hold her, and I wasn't about to leave her with strangers. The crowd gasped, then erupted in applause. Dr. Morrison, who was handing out diplomas, smiled so big I thought her face would split. "Congratulations, Miss Davis," she said, handing me my diploma while I juggled my daughter. "You earned this twice over." I looked out at the crowd and saw David standing, clapping, tears streaming down his face. Carol and Shanice were there too, screaming and holding up signs they'd made. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't alone at all. I'd built a family, a strange, unconventional, beautiful family. After the ceremony, David took us all to dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. Grace slept through most of it, and we toasted with sparkling cider and talked about the future. "So Howard in the fall," Carol said. "Have you found housing yet?" "Not yet. I've been so focused on just getting through graduation, I haven't had time to look." David cleared his throat. "Actually, I've been meaning to discuss that with you. I have a townhouse in Georgetown, 3-bedroom. It's currently empty. I'd like you to use it while you're in law school." I put down my glass. "David, you've already done so much, and I'm going to keep doing it until you tell me to stop. This isn't charity, Shayla. This is investment. You're going to be a brilliant attorney. You're going to help people. And when you do, you'll remember that someone believed in you. That's all I want. I'll pay you back someday," I said. "Every penny, I promise. I don't want you to pay me back. I want you to pay it forward. That's the deal." We moved to Washington in July. The townhouse was beautiful, historic, walking distance from the law school. 3 floors, exposed brick, a small garden out back, the kind of place I dreamed about living in but never thought I'd afford. David helped me move in, hiring movers, making sure everything was set up. He'd even furnished the 3rd bedroom as a nursery, complete with a crib, changing table, and a rocking chair. "When did you have time to do this?" I asked, standing in the doorway, overwhelmed. "I have people," he said with a smile, "and I wanted Grace to have a nice space." Law school started in August. I'd arranged for a nanny, a woman named Patricia, who came recommended by the school's student parent services office. She was older, maternal, experienced. Grace took to her immediately, which helped ease my guilt about leaving my daughter for hours at a time. But law school was harder than I imagined, harder than undergrad, harder than working 3 jobs, harder than anything. The reading load was insane. The professors used the Socratic method, cold calling students and verbally destroying anyone who wasn't prepared. The competition was intense. Everyone was smart, driven, used to being the best. I was drowning by week 3. I'd come home from class, feed Grace, put her to bed, then study until 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd wake up at 6 when Grace cried, feed her again, hand her to Patricia, go back to class. Repeat. My body was running on fumes. My mind was scattered. I felt like I was failing at everything. Then I got my first set of grades. Contracts, B-, torts, C+, civil procedure, B. I stared at those grades and felt my world collapse. I'd never gotten a C in my life. Never. I'd worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and this is what I had to show for it? I called David, sobbing. "I can't do this," I said. "I'm not smart enough. I don't belong here." "Stop," he said firmly. "Listen to me. First semester of law school is designed to break you. It's hazing, essentially. You're not failing. You're learning. These grades don't define you." "But I need to be better. I need to prove I deserve to be here." "You've already proved that. Didn't you get in? Aren't you there? Now you just have to survive, not excel. Survive. The rest will come." I wanted to believe him, but that night after we hung up, I sat in Grace's nursery and watched her sleep and wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe I should have stayed in state, gotten a job, raised my daughter without the stress of trying to be something more. Then Grace opened her eyes and looked at me, and something shifted. She was counting on me. Not just to survive, but to build something, to be an example, to show her that hard things were worth doing. So I kept going.
Second semester was better. I'd learned how to study for law school exams, how to think like a lawyer, how to manage the workload. My grades improved. B+ in torts, A- in criminal law, B in property. I also made friends. other student parents who understood the juggling act. We formed a study group, took turns watching each other's kids, shared notes when someone had to miss class for a pediatrician appointment. By the end of my first year, I'd found my rhythm. It wasn't perfect. There were still nights when I cried from exhaustion, mornings when I resented everything, moments when I missed Grace so much my chest physically hurt. But I was doing it. Summer after my first year, I got an internship at a nonprofit legal clinic that helped low-income families. It didn't pay much, but it was exactly the kind of work I wanted to do. I helped mothers fighting for custody, tenants facing eviction, immigrants navigating a system designed to confuse them. One case stuck with me. A woman named Maria, undocumented, whose kids were born here. ICE had picked up her husband. She was terrified she'd be next, that her kids would end up in the system. I worked with her for weeks, researching, filing motions, connecting her with resources. We couldn't get her husband back, but we got her on a path to legal status. When we won her case, she hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. "You saved my family," she said in Spanish. "No," I told her, "you saved yourself. I just helped with the paperwork." That summer, I realized what I was meant to do. I was going to be the kind of lawyer who showed up for people like Maria, people like my mother, people like me, people the system ignored. David came to visit in August, right before my second year started. He met Maria at a clinic event, heard her story, ended up donating $100,000 to the organization. When I thanked him, he just shrugged. Grace would have loved this place. She always cared about the underdogs. We had dinner that night, just the two of us. Patricia watched Grace. We went to a quiet restaurant, talked about law school, about life, about everything. "You know," David said, "when I first saw you at that fire, I thought I was just helping someone in crisis. I didn't realize I was gaining a daughter." My throat tightened. "You're the closest thing to a father I've ever had. And you're the closest thing to a child I ever got. Funny how life works." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then David said something that changed everything. "I've been diagnosed with cancer." The words didn't register at first. They were too big, too impossible. "What?" "Pancreatic, stage 3. I found out last month. The prognosis isn't great, but I'm starting treatment. I wanted you to know." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. "David, He sent quickly, "I'm going to fight it. I'm not giving up. But I needed to tell you because you're family, and family doesn't keep secrets." I reached across the table and grabbed his hand. "Whatever you need, anything, I'm here. I know you are. That's why I can face this." But even as he said it, I could see the fear in his eyes. And for the first time since I'd met him, David Harrington looked fragile. David started chemotherapy in September, right as I began my second year of law school. He'd insisted I not drop out, not put my life on hold for him, but there was no way I could just continue on like nothing was happening. This man had saved me. Now it was my turn to show up for him. I rearranged my schedule to drive to his place in Virginia every weekend. It was only 40 minutes from Georgetown, but it felt like crossing into another world. His estate was massive, all stone and sprawling gardens, the kind of place you saw in magazines. The first time I pulled up with Grace in her car seat, I felt like an imposter. But David's housekeeper, a woman named Margaret, who had been with him for 20 years, greeted us at the door like we belonged there. "Mr. Harrington talks about you constantly," she said, taking Grace from me with practiced ease. "This must be little Grace. Oh, she's beautiful." David was in the living room, sitting in a leather chair that looked like it cost more than my first car. He'd lost weight already, his face gaunt, but he smiled when he saw us. "My girls," he said. I sat with him for hours that first visit. Grace played on a blanket while we talked about everything and nothing. He told me stories about building his business, about meeting his wife at a charity gala, about their travels around the world. I told him about my classes, about the cases I was studying, about Grace's new obsession with trying to crawl. The thing about illness is that it forces honesty. There's no time for pretense when you're facing mortality. David told me things that weekend he'd never shared before. "I wasn't always good," he said. In business, I was ruthless. I crushed competitors. I fired people to protect profit margins. I prioritized money over everything else. Grace hated that side of me. She'd tell me I was losing myself. I didn't listen until it was too late. You changed, I said. That's what matters. Did I change, or did I just finally have time to be who I should have been all along? I didn't have an answer for that. As weeks turned into months, I watched David deteriorate. The chemo made him sick, weak, a shadow of the confident man I'd met at the fire. But he never complained, never asked for pity. He just kept fighting. I brought Grace every weekend. She was almost a year old now, babbling and pulling herself up on furniture. David would sit in his chair and watch her with this expression of pure joy, like she was the most entertaining thing in the world. "She looks like you," he said one afternoon. Grace had fallen asleep on his chest, her tiny hand curled around his finger. "Everyone says she has my mother's eyes." "She has your determination. I can see it already. The way she keeps trying to stand even when she falls, that's you." By November, David was hospitalized. The cancer had spread to his liver. His doctors were talking about hospice care, about making him comfortable. He refused. "I'm not giving up yet," he told them. "I have things to finish." I visited him in the hospital every day after classes. Sometimes he was lucid and we'd talk. Sometimes he was so drugged up he didn't recognize me. Those days were the hardest. Carol flew in from home to help with Grace so I could spend more time at the hospital. She took one look at me and immediately went into caretaker mode. "You're not sleeping. You're barely eating. You can't help him if you run yourself into the ground." "I know, I can't lose him, Carol. He's all I have." "That's not true. You have Grace. You have me. You have Shanice. You have a whole life you've built. David would want you to remember that." She was right, but it didn't make it easier. One night in mid-November, I was sitting beside David's hospital bed, studying for a constitutional law exam. He'd been asleep for hours. Then suddenly, his eyes opened. "Shayla," he said, his voice rough. "I'm here. I need to tell you something. About my estate." "David, don't. Listen, please." He struggled to sit up. I helped him, adjusting his pillows. "I've updated my will. I'm leaving you and Grace everything." I froze. "What?" "The townhouse in Georgetown, a trust fund for Grace's education and future, money to support you through law school and beyond. The foundation Grace and I built. I want you to run it, to continue her work." "David, I can't accept that. You have family, nephews, nieces, who haven't spoken to me in years, who only showed up when they thought there was money in it. You're my family, Shayla, you and Grace. This is what I want." "This is too much." "It's not enough. It'll never be enough to repay what you've given me. You let me be a father. You let me matter. That's worth more than any amount of money." I was crying now. "You matter. You've always mattered. Then honor me by accepting this. Promise me." "I promise." He relaxed back into his pillows, exhausted from the effort of talking. "Good. That's good." 2 days later, David slipped into a coma. The doctor said it could be hours or weeks. There was no way to know. I moved into the hospital room essentially, sleeping in the chair beside his bed, leaving only to feed Grace and take quick showers at the townhouse. My professors were understanding. They let me take my exams early, gave me extensions on papers. I barely remember taking those exams. I just went through the motions, my mind always back in that hospital room. David died on December 3rd at 2:15 in the morning. I was holding his hand. Margaret was there too, standing on his other side. He took one last shallow breath, then stopped. Just stopped. The monitors flatlined. Nurses came rushing in, but I knew he was already gone.
The funeral was massive. Hundreds of people showed up. Business associates, former employees, people David had helped over the years. I sat in the front row with Grace on my lap, listening to speeches about David's accomplishments, his generosity, his legacy. But none of them really knew him, not like I did. When it was my turn to speak, I walked up to the podium with Grace in my arms. She was fussy, sensing my distress. I held her close and looked out at all those faces.
David Harrington saved my life, I said. Not by giving me money or housing or opportunities, though he did all of that. He saved me by believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, by showing up, by being the father I never had. He used to say that Grace, his wife, made him promise to do something meaningful. I think he kept that promise. I'm standing here because he did. I had to stop. My voice broke. Grace reached up and patted my face with her small hand, and somehow that gave me strength to continue. He told me once that when I succeeded, I should pay it forward, help someone the way he helped me. That's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to honor him. By living the life he made possible. By being the lawyer he believed I could be. By teaching my daughter that the world is full of people like David. People who care, who show up, who make a difference. I sat back down. Carol wrapped her arm around me, and I let myself fall apart. The reading of the will happened a week later. David's lawyer, an older man named Mr. Peterson, laid out everything. The townhouse was mine, free and clear. There was a trust fund for Grace with $5 million. There was money for me to finish law school and start my career. And there was the foundation, the Grace Harrington Foundation, with me as the new executive director. David's nephews contested the will immediately. They hired lawyers, claimed I'd manipulated David, that he wasn't in his right mind when he changed things. It was ugly and painful, and exactly what David had warned me about. But David had been thorough. He'd documented everything. His mental competency evaluations, his reasons for the changes, his relationship with me and Grace. He'd even recorded a video. Mr. Peterson played it for everyone in the room. David appeared on the screen, thinner than I remembered, but clear-eyed and determined. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone and someone is challenging my wishes, he said. Let me be crystal clear. Shayla Davis is the daughter I never had. Grace is my granddaughter in every way that matters. They gave me purpose in my final years. They gave me joy, and they deserve everything I'm leaving them. If anyone wants to challenge this, they can do so knowing they're going against my explicit wishes, and they can live with that. The video ended. The room was silent. David's nephews withdrew their challenge the next day. But the damage was done. The story leaked to the press. Local papers ran headlines, "Billionaire leaves fortune to college student." The coverage was invasive, speculative, sometimes cruel. People accused me of being a gold digger, of seducing an old man, of lying about Grace's paternity to trap him. I stopped reading the articles, stopped checking social media, just focus on getting through each day. Law school became my refuge. In class, I was just another student. No one cared about tabloid stories or inheritance drama. They only cared if you knew the material. Second semester of my second year was when I finally found my footing. My grades improved, I made law review. I got a summer associate position at a prestigious firm in DC, one that specialized in civil rights law. But more importantly, I started working with the foundation. The Grace Harrington Foundation had been established 10 years earlier to provide scholarships to underprivileged students. David and his wife had funded it quietly, changing hundreds of lives. Now it was my responsibility to continue that work. I started small, visited the students who were currently receiving scholarships, heard their stories, learned what they needed beyond money, mentorship, connections, support. Then I expanded the mission. We started offering help with housing, childcare, emergency expenses. All the things I'd needed when I was struggling. All the things David had provided for me. By the end of my second year of law school, we'd helped 50 new students. By the time I graduated, we'd helped 300. Graduation from Howard Law was different from undergrad. I wasn't struggling anymore. I wasn't alone. Grace was 3 years old now, sitting in the audience with Carol and Shanice and Margaret. She waved at me when they called my name, shouting, "That's my Nama!" loud enough for everyone to hear. I'd done it. Against every odd, every obstacle, I'd become a lawyer.
I took a job at a nonprofit called the Justice Project. We represented low-income clients in housing, employment discrimination, and immigration matters. The pay was terrible compared to what I could have made at a corporate firm, but it was exactly where I needed to be. My first case was representing a single mother being evicted from her apartment. The landlord was retaliating because she had complained about black mold. It was an open and shut case legally, but the woman couldn't afford a lawyer and was about to lose everything.
I won. The landlord was ordered to fix the conditions and pay damages. The woman cried when I told her. "Thank you," she kept saying. "Thank you for seeing me." I thought about Maria, about David, about everyone who'd fought for me when I had nothing. "I see you," I said, "and I'm going to keep fighting for you. That's what I'm here for." Over the next 2 years, I built a reputation. The lawyer who actually cared, who returned calls, who showed up, who won cases that seemed unwinnable because she refused to give up. The foundation grew too. We were helping over 1,000 students a year now, providing not just scholarships, but wraparound services, mentorship programs, career counseling, mental health support. Grace started kindergarten. She was bright, curious, confident, everything I'd hoped she'd be. And she had no memory of the hard times, the fire, the struggle. To her, our life had always been stable, safe. Sometimes I'd watch her sleep and think about how different things could have been. If David hadn't been at that building, if he hadn't stopped to talk to me, if he'd been like everyone else, then just walked away. One life changed everything. But even as things stabilized, even as I achieved everything I dreamed of, something was missing. I was 30 years old, sitting in my office at the Justice Project, when I got a call that would complete the circle David had started 5 years earlier. "Is this Shayla Davis?" The voice was young, female, anxious. "Yes, this is she." "My name is Imani Rodriguez. I'm a sophomore at State. I got your number from the foundation website. I don't know if you help with stuff like this, but I didn't know who else to call." Something in her voice reminded me of myself. That particular kind of desperation mixed with determination. "Tell me what's going on," I said. Her story spilled out. 20 years old, pregnant, boyfriend gone, working 2 jobs, barely making rent. Her apartment building had been condemned due to code violations. She had nowhere to go. She was 3 weeks from midterms and terrified she'd have to drop out. I closed my eyes, heard David's voice in my head. Pay it forward. I asked where she was right now. "The library. I've been sleeping in my car, but campus security keeps making me move." "Don't move. I'm coming to get you." I drove the 2 hours to State, Grace in the back seat working on homework. My daughter was 5 now, in kindergarten, with David's eyes, that same penetrating kindness. I found Imani in the library parking lot, sitting in a beat-up Honda Civic stuffed with garbage bags of clothes. She was small, maybe 5'2", with her hair pulled back in a messy bun. When she saw me walking toward her car, she started crying. She said, I'm sorry for bothering you. I just didn't know what else to do." "Stop apologizing," I said. "I've been exactly where you are. Come with me." The townhouse in Georgetown had a 3rd bedroom that had been sitting empty. I'd kept it that way intentionally, like I was waiting for the right person to need it. Imani moved in that night. Over the next weeks, I watched her transform the same way I had. The fear in her eyes lessened. She started sleeping through the night. She caught up in her classes. And when her daughter Aaliyah was born 3 months later, I was in the delivery room holding her hand. "I don't understand why you're doing this," Imani said one night, a week after Aaliyah was born. We were sitting in the living room, baby sleeping, both of us exhausted but content. I told her about David, about the fire, about everything. "So this is what paying it forward looks like." This is what love looks like. Real love. The kind that shows up. Amani stayed with us for a year. She graduated with honors, got into a master's program in social work. When she left, she hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. I'm going to do this for someone else, she promised. I'm going to be someone's David. I know you will. After Amani, there were others. A veteran struggling with PTSD who needed help fighting an unjust eviction, a transgendered teen kicked out by their family who needed legal emancipation and housing, an immigrant mother whose kids were being taken by CPS due to poverty, not abuse.
I helped them all, through the Justice Project, through the foundation, through my own resources. Some cases I won, some I lost, but I showed up for every single one. The foundation became my life's work alongside practicing law. We expanded to 5 cities, then 10. We developed partnerships with universities, created mentorship networks, built housing specifically for student parents. Grace grew up surrounded by this work. She'd come with me to client meetings, sit quietly in courtrooms, help stuff envelopes for foundation mailings. By the time she was 10, she could explain systemic poverty better than most adults. "Why don't people just work harder?" she asked me once, with the innocent directness of a child. We were driving past a homeless encampment. I pulled over. "You see those people?" I said. "They're not lazy. Most of them work, but they don't make enough to afford rent because wages haven't kept up with housing costs. Or they got sick and lost everything to medical bills. Or they aged out of foster care with no support system. Or they made one mistake and our society decided they didn't deserve a second chance. That's not fair." "No, it's not. That's why we do what we do, to make it a little more fair." She was quiet for a moment, then, "When I grow up, I want to help people too. Like you, like Grandpa David." My heart clenched. She'd never met David, but I'd told her so many stories that he felt real to her. Grandpa David who saved us, who believed in us, who changed everything. "He'd be so proud of you," I said. When Grace was 12, we went back to visit my mother in Memphis. It had been years. We'd talked on the phone occasionally, but the distance between us, emotional more than physical, had never really closed. My mother opened the door of her small house and stared at Grace like she was seeing a ghost. "She looks just like you did," she said quietly. We sat in her living room, drinking sweet tea, making awkward small talk. Grace played on her iPad, oblivious to the tension. Finally, my mother said, "I was wrong about you." I looked up surprised. "I didn't think you'd make it. Thought you'd end up like me, working at the factory, struggling, stuck. But you proved me wrong. You did something I never had the courage to do." "What's that?" "You believed you deserved better. I never did. I just accepted this life like it was all I'd ever get." She looked at Grace. "But you fought for more, and you won." "I had help, Mama. I couldn't have done it alone." "Maybe, but you had to be someone worth helping. You had to be strong enough to accept it. That takes something special." It wasn't the reconciliation I dreamed of as a kid, but it was real, honest, and that was enough. Grace graduated high school at 16, having skipped 2 grades. She got into Stanford with a full scholarship. I cried for 3 days straight. "Mom, it's not that big a deal," she said, laughing at my emotional state. "It's a huge deal. You're doing this without struggle, without desperation, without having to sacrifice everything. That's what I wanted for you. That's what David wanted." She hugged me. "I know, Mom, and I'm going to make you both proud." She did. Grace studied international human rights law. She spent summers abroad, working with refugees, documenting war crimes, fighting for justice on a global scale. She was fearless in a way I never had been. The foundation continued to grow. By Grace's graduation from Stanford, we were operating in 30 cities, helping over 10,000 students annually.
We'd expanded into job training, housing assistance, legal aid, mental health services. We become one of the largest educational nonprofits in the country. I was 42 years old when I got the call to speak at a national education conference in Washington. They wanted me to tell my story, to talk about the work we were doing. I almost said no. I'd never been comfortable with attention, with praise. But then I thought about all the people who needed to hear that change was possible, that help was real, that showing up mattered. So I said yes. The conference was massive. Thousands of educators, policymakers, nonprofit leaders. I stood backstage, nervous, watching other speakers present their research and theories. Then it was my turn.
I walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. I couldn't see the audience, just felt their presence. I took a breath. 20 years ago, I was standing in a parking lot watching everything I owned burn. I began. I was 7 months pregnant, working 3 jobs, trying to graduate college with no safety net and no hope. I thought my life was over. Then a man I'd never met walked up and asked if I'd lost anything important. I told them everything: the fire, David, the struggles, the victories, the foundation, the hundreds of people we'd helped who were now helping others. David used to say that one life can change everything, I concluded. He was right. His life changed mine. My life has changed hundreds of others, and those lives will change thousands more. That's the real inheritance he left me. Not money, not houses, not opportunities. He left me the understanding that we're all connected, that showing up matters, that believing in someone can literally alter the trajectory of their existence. The audience erupted in applause. People stood, some were crying. I stood there, overwhelmed, thinking about how far I'd come from that parking lot. Backstage, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 22, nervous, holding a sleeping baby. "Ms. Davis," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. I'm one of your foundation students. You helped me stay in school when I had my daughter. I graduated last year. I'm a social worker now." I looked at her baby. "What's her name?" She said, "Grace." I named her after the foundation, after what you gave me. I started crying. Couldn't help it. This was why. This was everything. Grace, my Grace, was waiting for me in the audience. She was 21 now, graduating from Stanford in a month, already accepted to Yale Law. She hugged me when I found her. "That was perfect, Mom," she said. "Your grandpa would have loved this. Seeing all of this. He does see it. I know he does." That night, I went back to the townhouse in Georgetown, the same place David had given me 15 years earlier, the place where I'd raised my daughter, built my life, started the foundation. I sat in the living room looking at the photos on the wall. Me holding baby Grace in the hospital, Grace's first day of kindergarten, her high school graduation, my law school graduation, photos of the students we'd helped smiling, thriving, succeeding. And in the center, a photo of David, the only one I had of us together, taken at Grace's first birthday party. He was holding her, looking at her like she was made of light. I printed it, framed it, hung it in the most prominent place in my home. "We did it," I whispered to the photo. "Everything you believed we could do. We did it." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Davis, my name is Keisha. I'm a junior at State. My apartment building just caught fire. I lost everything. Someone told me I should reach out to you. Can you help?" I stared at the text for a long moment, saw myself in those words, felt the weight of history and responsibility and love. I typed back, "Yes, I can help."
Where are you right now? Because this was how it worked. One person helps another, that person helps someone else. The circle expands, ripples spreading outward, touching lives in ways we can't predict or measure. David saved me, I saved Amani, Amani saved someone else. And now, 20 years after standing in that parking lot watching my life burn, I was going to save Keisha. And Keisha would save someone else. This was David's real legacy, not buildings or money or foundations, but a chain of human beings who understood that we're responsible for each other, that showing up matters, that believing in someone can literally alter the trajectory of their existence. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. There was someone who needed me, and I wasn't going to let her down. Because that's what David taught me. That's what love looks like. You show up. Every single time. No matter what. Thanks so much for watching this story. If it moved you, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And seriously, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you all. Take care of each other out there. Show up for someone today. You never know whose life you might change.